I wanted to ask about the who. So David asked the how and the why and the what, but the who, which you kind of just touched on, and not the group the Who, the musical group, but I know you guys had an event with Joe Manchin recently, as well as John Huntsman. So those seem like two likely suspects, if I'm reading your tea leaves correctly. But my question is, so not only the who else would it be? Who are you talking to or considering? But then also the nuts and bolts of motivating people, because get out the vote, the GOTV, that's huge. You're talking about actual bodies to caucus to like knock doors even, because I guess we're talking general here, but the actual bodies that you need for volunteers to motivate, to mobilize, you guys don't have that. And that's something that the two major parties have they're entrenched. And then also just the brand loyalty that maybe in theory, 59% might say they're open, but when the curtain's closed, there's that instinctual brand loyalty with Coke or Pepsi, Democrat or Republican. How are you going to overcome that?
Yeah. Well, look, you're right, Carrie, so if you look at the latest Gallup poll shows almost half the country, 49%, self-identifying as independent. Now, some people will say, well, but in the end, they reliably tend to vote Democrat or Republican. And that's true, but that's in the context of a binary choice. If it's the major party Democrat and a Republican and a protest candidate isn't winning, then yeah, most people don't want to throw away their vote. That's not what we're talking about doing here. The other really key point is we're never going to run a campaign. So there's a NASA analogy I like to use, which is we are building the launching pad, which constitutes really ballot access, which we're working to get in states across the country. We just got on the ballot in Arkansas yesterday, Utah last week. Ideas, we put out our common sense policy booklet. You can find that up on our website. We know any ticket, of course, would need that. And then we're investing a lot in a citizen data file to sort of target and turn out the kinds of people that we know would have to get this kind of, would support this kind of ticket. If we give our ballot line to a ticket, it'll be up for them to build the campaign. So to build the rocket ship itself. And they'd have 7-8 months to do that. The one point, Carrie, that is really interesting, look, GOTV is always really important. And you're right, both major parties don't only have a party apparatus, but they've got interest groups that'll mobilize on their behalf. One of the things that has made that a little less important, it's still important, is the explosion in mail voting. And it has made it much, much easier to use digital tools to just target and turn out people where they are. In the 2020 election, 40% of people voted by mail. 60% of people voted early, which grew exponentially from the election before and is probably going to grow even more in this next election because a lot of states have made it easier to do it.
Well, let me ask you this. Another thing is that unlike a lot of political parties and recipients, you folks don't have to reveal your donors. I just want to confirm, right, in the era of dark money, a lot of people are really worried. Well, who's to say that, someone like Clarence Thomas's sugar daddy, Harlan Crow, couldn't be, and right, donors like that couldn't be bankrolling you. So A, is it true that you're not going to reveal your donors? And if that's true, don't you think revealing them would give you guys more credibility and assuage a lot of people's concerns? Are you going to reveal them or not?
No. And I'll tell you why. So we've never revealed our donors because we're not a party. We're a 501c4.
But this is different. It's different if you're making policy proposals and as opposed to running a campaign where you're putting someone up for an election because you haven't been doing this for 10 years. This is the first time that you're doing this.
So it isn't different. We're not putting somebody up for election. We're getting ballot access. But there's a very specific reason we don't do this, and I'm going to tell you why. Over 60 years ago, there was a landmark Supreme Court case with the NAACP. And the Supreme Court sided with the NAACP because the state of Alabama was trying to force them to disclose their donors. And they said, we don't want to do it because they're going to face intimidation. It is a violation of their privacy. And the Supreme Court agreed with them. Here's why this has relevance today. As you might have seen this week, there is a group that's got stood up called Save Our Republic. They've self-anointed themselves with that task. with the explicit task of stopping no labels. Dick Gephardt, former Democratic majority leader, is involved with it. He went on the air this week and said explicitly, when they asked, well, what is Save Our Republic going to do? He said, well, among other things, we're going to try to get no labels donors to walk away from them. So no, we're not going to provide a punch list to people who want to destroy us so they can make it easier to go after them. It just doesn't make any sense.
Carrie?
Well, I mean, I think I agree with you, Dave, on the look. I work with a number of conservative groups who are 501c3s and C4s, and I agree with donor privacy. That is important. But if it walks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, how is it not a duck if you're actually putting up a candidate? To me, it seems like that's actually going beyond, and you're going into the FEC territory where you should be disclosing donors.
So, look, we've got a great legal team on this. We feel very comfortable about where we stand, and that we're not only adhering to the letter, but the spirit of all the laws about being a C4. But look, there's something else underpinning this, and this is really something I want to address directly. I think there's two major criticisms of our effort. One of them is a good faith criticism. I think it's of the kind that Dave levies, which goes something like this. It's nice that you're trying to put up this independent candidate, but the unintended consequence of what you're doing is going to get Donald Trump elected. We don't agree with that, but you can have a good faith debate about that. There is a second argument that is out there from some of our opponents, which goes like this. You want to get Trump elected. This is a whole secret effort to get Trump elected, and that just doesn't even pass the stupid test. I mean, we are co-chaired by Joe Lieberman, the 2000 Democratic Party nominee, Dr. Ben Chavis, who spent 60 years in Democratic politics and got his start in his career working for Martin Luther King. In full disclosure, I came up on the Democratic side of politics. I want nothing to do with ever letting Donald Trump near the White House again. We had a letter from Chavis and Lieberman that we released a month ago, the headline of which was, Donald Trump should never again be president. So when we start to see attacks like that, that's a bad faith attack that tells us that in the groups that are leavening it are not really interested in protecting democracy. They're interested in protecting their turf. A lot of what's coming at us is from people in Washington who have a vested interest in a paycheck that is attached to keeping more voices out of the mix.
Well, I would say, first of all, Joe Lieberman was campaigning for John McCain in 2008, more recently than he was on the ticket. And, the other thing, which I think is such a big issue here, is when you're getting people actually out to vote, and here's the thing. Here's a trivia question. Name the last non-Democrat or Republican that got even one electoral vote in a presidential election. Do you know who that was?
George Wallace.
There you go.
George Wallace.
1968. Yep. Okay.
Yep.
Ross Perot did not get and he ran as a segregationist. Ross Perot did not get a single electoral vote despite getting 19% of the vote. And the way the Electoral College is set up, it makes it very, very hard if you're not a Democrat or Republican, because no matter how bad you are, 33% is going to vote for a Republican no matter what. 33% at least is going to vote for a Democrat. And so you guys, I believe, had this strategy where, if I'm quoting you correctly, you're going to get 286 electoral votes, and you're going to do it by winning states all the way from Texas to Florida to Hawaii. I mean, this just seems like fantasy to me, because it's one thing if you look at 1992, okay, those were considered two pretty moderate candidates, right? So people said, well, there's not that much of a difference between George Bush and H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton. One's more conservative Democrat, one's more moderate Republican. In this election, where people think if the other party is an existential threat to the country, they're less likely to waste their vote and say, it doesn't really matter. But again, unless it comes to the point where when people don't like both candidates, they break overwhelmingly for Biden. So this electoral vote strategy, I mean, can you see how a lot of people think it's just fantasy?
Dave, given the history of independent candidacies, of course we can understand their skepticism. But I think, you go back to 92, the thing is that's why there's such a bigger opening today than there was in 1992. In 92, when Perot ran, I think most people would say George Bush Sr., Bill Clinton, they were pretty center right, center left. Nobody was saying they're going to move to Canada if George Bush Sr. wins, right? Like they do today. Today, you see a much bigger gap between what people are otherwise offering. This is one of the things we really highlight in our common sense agenda. You can drive a Mack truck through what most of the public wants on issues like immigration, energy and climate, even some of the social issues like abortion, and where the common sense majority is. It offers a real opportunity for somebody to come along and to create some very strong contrast from what the major party nominees are offering. So, Dave, one of the things, because I know you've been a longtime supporter of ours, and I respect people's reservations about this. The one thing I would ask for people who are hesitant is to say, do we not at least deserve a better debate than we're having and we're almost certainly going to get? And our view is, if you don't have another voice in the process, then we know what the terms of debate are going to be. One side will set the terms of debate as vote for us or the MAGA fascists are taking over, and the other side will set it up as vote for us or the socialists are going to turn us into Venezuela. That is where we're headed for the next 16 months, unless another voice comes in and says, you know what, 60% of the country does not want any part of this. We don't want a civil war, even though there's people on both sides who talk very loosely about this kind of nonsense. They'd actually like a debate on the issues that matter to them. And our view is that unless we have another voice in the process, we're not going to get that debate. We're going to have another hate and fear election instead of one that actually gets at issues people care about.